Today's show, hours before we were due to start recording, the Hornets announced they were moving on from Mitch Kupchak, moving into a senior advisor role and starting their new president of basketball operations search immediately. As well as that, we have our first reactions to the Hornets' new additions, 5 new players, all played on Saturday night against the Memphis Grizzlies and picked up a win, the first one in 10. So me and Chase are going to be sharing our immediate reactions from some of those players and doing a little bit of a glass half full, glass half empty in terms of what you can maybe expect from those players moving forward for the rest of the season. And for some of them, also maybe into next season too. So Chase, tell me, I'm always keen to hear, where were you when you heard the Mitch Kupchak news, when the Adrian Wojnarowski notification came across your phone?
I was right on my couch. I was getting ready to start prepping for this very podcast, getting my coffee set up. I had my breakfast right next to me, turning my TV on, putting the Hornets Grizzlies game on to play in the background. Since it was such a pleasurable experience, I thought I might as well go back for more, which was one of very rare occasions over the last couple of years of Hornets basketball. And I pull up my phone, and that's the first thing I see is that lone notification is that Mitch Kupchak had, I don't know if they phrased it as stepping down or stepping aside and will transition into his advisory role within the organization, which I think is something that we all can say we expected. Many people would probably say that they were hoping that would happen. But either way, it is here about 4 days after the trade deadline. The search is beginning immediately. So we can expect that before the end of the regular season, which is something Woj noted, that there will be a new man in charge of the Charlotte Hornets front office.
Yeah. And look, big picture, the move surprises nobody, but the timing, I think, surprises some. Now, we got some rumblings. I think it was either from Jake Fisher or Mark Stein last week, I think it was, that there might be changes in the front office after the deadline. But so far, the reason everyone had been told why there hadn't been a change before the deadline was that, well, you're not going to be able to access some of the candidates you want to during the regular season. Okay. Well, now they've made the change during the regular season. So how is it that that is the case then, but it's not the case now? So that the timing is interesting. Now, the fact that Mitch Kupchak is staying on in that advisory role makes it all make a little bit more sense, because now it's not like you've got someone who's not going to be here in a month's time handling the trade deadline. You've got someone who's going to remain as an advisor to the owners, to the front office, and still has invested interest in the team. So isn't just making short-term moves. And we saw from the nature of some of those moves with the Dallas Mavericks, with the Oklahoma City Thunder, 2 trades we've not even had a chance to really speak about, but have already been covered in depth by the other podcasts on the All Hornets podcast network, that they are future thinking moves. So interesting timing with the change coming. What do you think about this senior advisor role? I think we've heard it rumored in the past. I guess what I'm curious, is this a Wes Wilcox kind of one, or is this a Jerry West one? Now, Jerry West, for those who know, has been a very respected senior advisor to the LA Clippers, and he was with the Golden State Warriors before that. And he is involved while also not having a day-to-day role. Whereas Wilcox was the GM of the Atlanta Hawks, who got moved to the advisory role, which is also code for he was basically shuffled out the door and they didn't want to say that they fired him. And I'm yet to really figure out which one this Kupchak version is. Just the nature of the relationship and his North Carolina ties makes me think it's more likely the prior. But what do you think?
Yeah, and that's my main reasoning for it as well, is I think that just given his ties to the organization, to the area, his long-standing ties in the NBA in general, like I think this is probably going to be him shifting into like a genuine advisory role. I mean, on top of the fact that for all the, shortcomings that the franchise has had in terms of their roster moves over the last couple of years, Mitch has still been very good at drafting in his time with the Hornets. They've gotten more than a handful of players out of the draft. I mean, they've got hit on both of their high draft picks. They got LaMelo number 3, Brandon Miller number 2. Both of those picks look like players that A, already made an all-star team, or B, are going to make them in the future. That's the most important thing. He's got plenty of picks out of the second round. Like, there is definitely value in keeping his perspective around the organization. He clearly has an eye for talent, at least to an average degree, if not an above average degree, among NBA decision makers and evaluators. I'm on top of the fact that, like we said, he has strong ties to the organization given his past. I think it makes perfect sense to kind of allow him to choose how he ends his career and step back into whatever capacity that he sees fit, and maybe be more involved with the draft than he is with free agency or trades or the day-to-day operations, or he's going to be, in the gym with players, like giving them more advice, like maybe in more of a scouting type of role and not involved at all in any type of transaction thing. Like, who knows what it's going to be, but I am kind of looking forward to seeing how that transition happens as well, because I mean, most people in his position just get fired. They don't, transition into a new role. So it's going to be an interesting thing to follow.
What Mitch Kupchak does have, if you love him or you hate him, is significant experience and connections across the NBA, right? He is well respected amongst his peers. He has probably done a trade or transaction with every single franchise in the NBA at this point. He has links to owners, other front offices. You bring in a newer, younger lead decision maker, which is, we'll get onto some names later, the rumored guys. They aren't just going to have the network that Mitch Kupchak has. So, Mitch being able to know who the key people are to speak to, who the key influences are, all of that is important, right? And that's not coming down to like basketball talent eye. That's just like understanding the league and how it works. We're not going to get into this too much. I will say, I think he's an average talent evaluator in the draft. Everyone points to LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, and I know we're going to disagree on this, and that's okay. LaMelo Ball, it was a top 3 player draft. Okay, I think everyone thinks that James Wiseman was number 1 on the board, and they were there at number 3, and they took the guy. I don't give him that much credit for that one. I'm sorry, I just don't. Brandon Miller is the one that you can point to and go, everyone was calling me an idiot, and this is looking great so far. Okay, and that is the one. But even you yourself, last week on the podcast, but I had people messaging me last week, by the way, saying that I should have pushed back harder against you when you said that you still had Scoot Henderson against over Brandon Miller in your draft scouting. So I'm pushing back now for them. I think those are that is the one that you can point to. All the second round stuff, yeah, he got a handful of players. He was here for 4 or 5 years. Probably should get a handful of players. They had a lot of draft picks, right? So I would say he's an average talent evaluator. I don't think there is a stellar record here, but I don't want us to go too far down the Kupchak rabbit hole here.
That's a whole nother podcast, which we will have at a later date. So
we will. We'll be doing a full retrospective on the Kupchak era, also on the Gordon Hayward era, probably at some point later this season. I think, they feel very relevant now, but there's just so much other stuff to talk about at the minute. It's probably not the time. But we have to close the chapter on those 2 names because they've been a huge part of this franchise for the last 4 or 5 years. And I think it's right that now we have the full body of work. We go back and look.